Welcome to We Are Endurance webinar series. Today, we're going to be talking about the best and the worst races and the lessons learned from these races. And I want to start this off by asking Jackie to talk a little bit about, I know we weren't going to talk about the best races, but if you could just share with me one of the better races that you've done and the takeaway from that before we get into the worst races.
Okay, that sounds good. Actually, I just did a race a couple weeks ago. It was a Revel Series race called Mount Charleston, and I thought that race was extremely well organized, and I had a great outcome. And it's one of these. Apparently, Revel does these marathons that are all downhill, so people PR at all of them, and a fair amount of people do them so they can Boston qualify. I just thought it was an extremely well done race, and I would do another one.
That's cool. All right, Stephen, what about you? You're on mute, Stephen. Still on mute. There you go.
Okay. I'm trying to think of one that I did recently that I really enjoyed. I mean, I enjoy doing the Ironman races. I think they're run well, but that's like a whole thing unto itself. I've done some of the Rev 3 races. 2 years ago, I did Otello Swim Run, Casco Bay, Maine, and I really enjoyed it. Probably because I didn't have part of it being I didn't have to get a bike there, but it was kind of more of a laid back atmosphere and really a whole natural beauty of island hopping through Casco Bay was great.
Cool. Steve, G?
Hi. Oh, so we're talking about some
best
unusual races as well.
Well, unusual, the best, yeah.
All right. Before we get to the worst one, I think the most unusual and interesting one was a race called the Leatherman's Loop. It's a trail race that they run in the spring up in, I guess it's Westchester, in a preserve area called Ward Pound Ridge, not far from here. And in before times, it was a wildly popular race that sold out like in a blink, that people from the area, always clamored to do. And I always wanted to run it. And I finally got in 2019. And I found it to be really enjoyable because it was literally an experience. It's a trail race strictly, but almost had some of those, what are those, endurance challenge things, those kooky races where you jump over barrels and things like that. Except that it was literally just a running race. The beauty part of this is that it's in a beautiful, beautiful preserve over there, and I'm sure there are a few people who are actually racing it, but it's a really, really crowded field, and it's more like a slog, literally over hill and dale through I'd say at least, I'm going to say 3 stream crossings. 2 of them, no joke, waist deep, frigid, cold, spring running water. And it was a rainy day as well, gray, overcast. But I don't know when I had a better time. And I don't mean chronologically, I mean just an enjoyable time. I went by myself, nobody else that I knew was running it. I didn't know a soul, but it was literally just like a jaunt through the woods. And between the stream crossings, which were pretty well managed because they literally had ropes across there so that you could literally hold yourself. And, and they had helpers on both ends of the streams. And then they had several scrambles, literally scrambles that were like as steep as staircases that were probably 100 feet high. That was just rocks and slippery mud. And I think the race is something in the range of about 10K plus or minus. They don't really measure it that carefully. And it's based on this legend of some, like, think of like Washington Irving and the Four Horsemen. There's this legend of the leather man who haunts the woods, and they have some kooky guy who dresses like the leather man, and he kind of runs around through the race and just like jumps out of the trees and kind of startles people, and then runs alongside people, and then takes selfies with you, and this time is not a factor by any means. It's just fun to just run across this kooky race and get to take pictures with the Leatherman. And I guess I understand why it was so popular, but it was one of those events that was a race, but not something that you had to think about in terms of competition or planning or times or anything like that. So it was literally just going out in the woods with similarly minded people, getting wet and soggy and having a really, really great time. So I would recommend it. It's back on as in after times now, and if you can get in, it's just a nice experience. It would really be a good group event. It would really be enjoyable for this group because you can go at any pace you want, and people do, and it's memorable. It's a lot of fun.
Thank you. Nicole, what about you?
Hello. Let's see. Most unique race I've done would be Rocket Man, Florida. This was a race that was put on only 3 years. I did it the first year and the third year. It takes place down in Florida, right outside of the Kennedy Space Center. And the most unique thing about it is that for the bike portion of the race, you get to race on NASA flight grounds, places that the general public generally doesn't get to see. So I'm a space nerd, so grew up during the Russian-American space race. So it was great for me. During the ride, you get to ride past the launch pads, past launch pad 39A, where all of the manned space flights during the Apollo era and since have taken place. They got some great pictures of us passing that I've used a lot. And the awards were rocket shaped, and it was just a great race in a unique location. Like I said, they only were able to do it 3 years because it got far too hard for them to get access to the grounds as SpaceX and other launches were taking place out of the area. But it was great. And the third time I did it, the second time I did it, the third time they did it, I had about 6 other friends who came down and did it. So not only was it a great race, but it was good. It was a great time experiencing it with all of my friends.
Yeah. That definitely has a lot to do, I think, with some of the better races. When you do it with a group, it's just so much fun. Steve, you had mentioned solo races. I think that, for me, I mostly do races alone. I don't know, what other people experience. Jackie, you're shaking your head, so I guess you're in the same boat. If I want to do a race, I want to do a race, and I just sign up and do it. That's it. All right, so let's talk a little bit about some of the worst races and what experiences you had. Like, what were some of the takeaways from these bad experiences? And third question, Steve, I think Stephen, you had mentioned that one of the better races that you've done was well organized. Does a race have to be well organized for it to be a good or a bad race, or can it be, doesn't really matter? So I'm gonna start with you, Jackie.
Oh, hi. I don't know if you can see or hear me. I'm in Whole Foods on Houston Street in New York City. So nice place to be, nice and sort of cool. So let me see. I was trying to think about the worst race. And the race I did that I'm thinking of was in St. Petersburg, Florida. And I didn't have a way to get there except for a regular cab or Uber. I forget how I got there. And that was okay. I was working at a meeting at the time. So I had to do the race, stay around for a little while, and then go back. So I remember calling the race director with a few questions. And I just said, by any chance, is anyone staying near the Fragrance Hotel that can pick me up? I can help pay for this. And he was very cranky. He said, no, we don't have time for this. I don't have time for this. So he sort of hung up on me. And I figured, okay, the guy's having a bad day. We all have bad days. And so I got there, and it was at this place that had bingo and everything. I mean, this is St. Petersburg, Florida. And it was a very nice place, very nice setting. I believe the course is accurate. It was flat. I had no problem with that. So well organized, yes. And I think even plenty of water stops. But then when I got to the end, he was, there was, let me see, I think there was a preacher there. And so the preacher was drinking some soda, and it was from a 2-liter thing. And there wasn't any really other refreshments there. And so the same guy who was cranky with me, I recognized his voice, sort of grabbed the soda bottle away from me and said, "You can't have this." I mean, you pay a race fee, there are refreshments on the table, but the preacher was having it, but I couldn't have it. I mean, it was just left a bad taste. I mean, he didn't even want to make an announcement. Is anyone driving back by way of put? I mean, so even though the race is well organized and they may have done it for it, didn't have a history, but this is one person in charge. I think his title was race director. Was not. I can't even remember the name of it, and I think I forgot about it until now. So it's not. It wasn't too memorable. It shows that most race directors that I've met are willing to bend over backwards to make any runner happy. I mean, I guess most of the crowd here has that experience. And then you come across that one bad apple and you just wonder, why is he doing this? He's engaging with people all the time. Why is he doing this? So that's my take.
Thank you. How about you, Jackie Lemon Denton?
Oh, I'm sorry, you meant another Jackie one?
There's three on the call.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I didn't mean
No, it's fine. No, it was fine. I don't know. Jackie Lemon Denton, are you on?
And I'm trying.
There you are. Oh,
You saw? Can you hear me?
yeah, now we can. Yeah,
Okay.
so talk to us about your worst race and any takeaways that you got from that.
Wow. Can it be a try, or it has to be a race?
Yeah, it could be, yeah, definitely could be try.
I did the Iron Girl
Mhm.
in New Jersey. So I can't even remember. It was right after Hurricane Sandy. So I can't even remember what year it was. It should have been canceled in the beginning. The water was so choppy. It was really, really bad. That race it's since been canceled. I haven't had it since that was last year, right after Hurricane Sandy. The water was just unbearable. I don't know how I made it through, but I did. it wasn't well supported. And going down the day before, it was a small investment for a hotel, for a race that wasn't really well supported. And now that I know better, and I look at races, I forgot who was talking before the other Jacqueline just spoke, because I didn't hear the name of the race that you mentioned, that recommend that it was a good one because it was no time. I now I look at things like that. It's important, especially when you're investing money to travel, hotel, transportation, food, race cost. It should be supported, and I don't mean just crowd supported. It should be that I get more than a bagel and a bottle of water at the end of the race. And if I'm the turtle, let me have at least a bottle of water and a bagel. Shouldn't be the races that say they ran out of medals. That's unacceptable. You knew the registration prior to when you cut it off. So your medals should, if anything, you should have more, and then you turn them over to an organization and donate them. So that's unacceptable. And that happened in Atlantic City at the all women's try. So yes, they didn't have enough medals.
Oh, yeah.
So
Okay. Thank you.
that's it.
Let me ask you something, Jackie. So, what did you learn from that race? Like, what was your takeaway?
Well, my takeaway was that if I did not have my tribe, my supporters, I don't think I could have finished the race.
Mm-hmm.
That was very, very important. And I'll say that if you're traveling somewhere and you're the only person and you're not really comfortable, could be your first try, could you be your first Ironman, half Ironman. I think it's important to have someone with you that is for support, at least that moral support. And again, I didn't have there was very few refreshments or anything after. If my tribe wasn't there, I wouldn't have anything.
Wow. Yeah. That's great. Thank you for sharing that. What about you, Stephen? A. We have like everybody's name is here.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I want to go to Oceanside 70.3 last year. So I watched that on the live stream. It was on April 1st, and it brought back some good and bad memories. So that I had signed up for that race to do it in 2020, but because of COVID, the race was postponed from April until October, and I didn't want to do it in October. So I opted to go over to the next year, which was 2022 in the spring. I had made some plans to meet some people out there too that I knew in San Diego, but my brother was coming with me, so we had to switch around our plans, and he had retired and moved, so I wanted to get together with him. But I thought that my training over the winter, because I was swimming with a master's group a couple nights a week, and I was riding on my Yahoo, and I was trying to get out and do some running, was sufficient. However, I had not been swimming in open water, and I wasn't out riding on the streets. I felt pretty good when I got there. I was confident. However, it was an open, it was an ocean swim. And it's in the ocean, so there's surf break. So the morning of the race felt pretty good. Get to transition, told my brother I'd meet him on the beach just to drop off what I wanted to keep on until I was ready to get in my corral group to start the swim. couldn't find them. It's a pretty crowded, big race. I forget if it's like 3,000 or 5,000 people, but I couldn't find them. So I go back to transition, put my stuff away. So I wasn't in a good mood. Then we had a delay because of possible thunderstorm. So we got a little bit of rain, got a little delay. Anyway, it was a beach start. Also, not my favorite, but got in the water, really didn't have an issue too much with the water, was about 60 degrees. So I had been swimming in the pool, getting the open water, but I had a real problem getting past the surf break, which I usually don't do, but for whatever reason, just had a problem. The waves were breaking 3 times. So they were breaking, maybe 50 yards out, then breaking again and breaking again. There was a rip current and an undertow, and I was kind of getting knocked around. By the time I got past the surf break to get to the buoy to hang a right to get about another half mile or so into the harbor, I just couldn't get any kind of rhythm going, and I was hyperventilating in the water, which it's not happened to me before. I don't know if it was the cold, I was just didn't have it that day, but I just tried to get myself together, take a few breaks, try to get my breathing under control, get myself into the harbor, get out of the swim, which I did. Took a seat, took a few minutes just to get myself together before I got on the bike. The bike course goes out through Camp Pendleton, which is the Marine base north of San Diego in Oceanside. And there's a couple of steep hills on the course, but there's one very steep hill. And I got boxed in going up the hill to the right, and the riders in front of me and to the left of me both ran out of gears and decided that they were going to unclip, which left me no alternative other than to either crash or unclip and get out. So I had to get out.
Oh my God.
Which means I had to walk up the rest of the hill. It was just too steep for me to get back on the bike. Anyway, got back over the hill, finished the bike course, started the run. It's a pretty nice run. It's along the beach and then into the neighborhoods and back along the beach to the finish. And at some point on the run course, I know I started cramping. So for me, that day was just suffering on every part of the race. But I give myself credit for at least slowing down on the swim, taking my time, trying to get it back together, even though it was pretty disappointing. Was doing okay on the bike, but just didn't have an alternative because I didn't want to hit the deck or go down or try to make some crazy turn to maneuver myself through people. But was able to get through, and I finished the race. But my takeaway from that was maybe that was just a little bit too ambitious to try to do that kind of a race that early in the season when I hadn't given myself the opportunity to swim in the open water and at least get some really long outdoor bike rides in.
Mhm. Yeah, I think those early triathlons are very, very tough because of that. Thank you for sharing that. Nicole, do you have a story to tell us?
Yeah, here I am. There's so many reasons why a race could be bad.
Yeah.
So I'm going to choose my first half Ironman triathlon as worst. It was a race put on by an organization called Toronto Racing. It was at a state park in Delaware, Lum's Pond, small pond. Well, not pond, small lake for the swim. Swim went fine. Bike actually went fine too. The run, a week before the race, they announced that it was no longer going to be a road run. It was going to be a trail run. I never trail run. I had never trail run at that point. So when the race came around, it was literally not what I signed up for. It It was in September and turned out to be incredibly hot. It was well into the 90s in the second week of September. So swim went okay, bike went okay. In the run, it was just hot as hell. It was blazes. And when they changed it to a trail run, they said it was 90% shaded. And it really wasn't. It was less than 50% shaded. So we were out in the blazing sun for this run. I was doing trail running, which I don't do. So I was very worried about tripping, turning my ankles, that sort of thing. For most of us, it turned into a death march with major walking portions. They ended up running out of water and ice on the run course. And they ended up having to close the run course and pull people off before the designated time limit. So I had some friends who would have been able to finish if they were allowed to within the time limit, but they were swept off the course because they had run out of everything. The emergency services ended up having to leave because they had used up their equipment, helping people with sunstroke and everything. Spectators were going down with the heat. I know they couldn't necessarily anticipate that, but running out of water and ice on the run course is really bad.
Yeah.
It was my first half iron, so it was a PR, and I actually hit the podium, which was fun. But my takeaway from this was to never do another race by this racing group. And then they went out of business a couple of years later.
Wow. Oh my God.
Bye-bye.
Wow. Yeah, I don't know how they could run out of stuff. I mean, it makes absolutely no sense to me. Buy more and then donate. Jackie
Yeah.
said that. Yeah. The trail run though was strange that they changed it to a trail run.
I don't know. They never said what happened. I don't know if they had their permits pulled for the
That's
road
right,
or
yes.
something. Maybe it was the best of a bad situation, but I was totally unprepared for a trail run race.
Yeah. What about you, Jackie B?
Okay, I even put together a PowerPoint, but I have no clue how to share it on something like this. But my
You could share it if you want.
I'm not sure if I know how. Like I could try and I don't see an option.
Oh, let me just hold on a minute. Now there's an option on the bottom, the green.
Okay. Share content. Okay. Let's see. I don't think I got it right. It's probably not sharing the file that I had open because I probably have to back out of Zoom or something like that. Anyway, sorry.
That's okay.
Anyway, so the race that I had trouble with was Ironman Alaska. And I know Stephen A had, he finished the race successfully, but I had a number of problems with the race, and not that it was a problem with Ironman, the organization, or Ironman Alaska itself. My problem ended up really being the weather. And so let me just say that when I signed up for the race, I knew it was going to be cold, right? I figured it was going to be, high temperature between 50 and 60, which I was thinking, okay, that's the perfect temperature for running a marathon. You just have to manage your layers on the bike. And then they told us the water temperature would be around 60 degrees. And I had done Ironman Maryland back in 2015, and it was held in October, and the water temperature was 63 degrees. So with the right gear, I figured, I can do this. So I signed up for the race, and then, we show up on site, and one of the first things that we start hearing is that Juneau, Alaska is in a rainforest. And so I thought to myself, I'm like, I had never heard this before. And I think if I would have known that Juneau was a rainforest, I might have thought twice about signing up. But essentially that was just, it was something that completely slipped my grasp. And I think it's an important thing to know if you're doing a race, whether or not the odds are that it's going to rain during your race. So for the swim, the actual swim temperature on race day was 56 degrees, which is significantly colder than 60 degrees. And so that morning it was raining while we were waiting to start. And they announced just before the swim start that they were cutting the swim distance in half, which, according to the rules, I don't think that's normal, but they did it anyway because I think they didn't want half the field to DNF during the swim. So I was grateful for that, but you still had to get in that freezing cold water and swim 1.2 miles. And I got to say, it was so cold, I could barely put my face in the water. So the first, I don't know, probably the first couple hundred meters of the swim, I was dog paddling. And then eventually I got my face in the water, but during that swim, my hands went numb because you're not allowed to wear gloves, I don't know any race under USAT rules where you're allowed to wear gloves. I don't think it exists. I had on a full wetsuit. I had on a neoprene cap. I had on neoprene booties. I had all the legit legal gear that you can wear to stay warm. And I didn't have a hypothermic reaction, but my feet went numb and my hands went numb. So, it's like probably on the borderline of what could have gone wrong. So I finished the swim. It took me an hour and 6 minutes. You have an hour and 10 time limit. And then I had to run a half mile to transition. It was a long distance and some of it was uphill, big deal. This going in, right? There's going to be these kind of things. But my feet were so numb. It was like they had fallen asleep, and that it was just very strange. My transition took 26 minutes, which should never happen in a half iron, not even a full iron distance. I think 15 minutes is usually the target that I try to hit because, it's not a picnic and you don't want to waste time. You need to get to the next event. But I was so cold, I couldn't change quickly and I had to put on all dry clothes. Then the entire bike, which for me lasted 8 hours, it was a 112-mile bike and it was a lot of hills. It rained the entire bike. So it took me 8 hours. Actually, I take that back. It didn't rain the entire bike. It rained like 7 out of the 8 hours for me. And I had some great gear on. I had a waterproof cycling jacket. I had dishwashing gloves, which are great for cycling in the rain. But I chose to wear a pair of Lululemon tights over my tri-shorts, and they acted more like sponges than anything. And so if you can imagine while you're riding your bike in the rain, which most of us would never do, the water was splashing off of my bike onto my pants, and it would drip down into my shoes. So I had water sloshing in my shoe. I mean, it was just everything that could go wrong as far as the rain on the bike did. And then I was pretty well convinced during this entire bike that I was over the time limit. I actually probably shouldn't have been allowed to start the bike because I think I'd gone beyond whatever published time limit there would have been between the swim and transition, but they allowed us to keep going. So I was pretty convinced I was going to get pulled. I thought, I'm going to come in off the bike. They're going to take my timing chip. So I was, starting to think that way. I mean, I basically gave up during the bike. And then I finished the bike and they don't take my chip. So now I'm like, what am I going to do? I'm going to go through the motions and get ready for the bike or the run and go out there on the run course. And I did that, but I'm still in my head thinking, I'm over the time limit. How could this be? So I went out and I did one loop of the run course. It was a 2 loop. So each loop was, 13.1. And this was problematic now because it had rained so much. When you're running on the sidewalk, as cars come by on the road, they hit a puddle and they water comes. So I'm trying to run on the far edge of the sidewalk and it was really that crazy. And, it actually had some really great elements. The run course was very unique. And, we ran past a shooting range, which was really odd. I'm sure on an Ironman course. Yeah, Steven's laughing because he remembers this, right? Somebody was firing off they said it was a howitzer. This thing sounded like a cannon going off. And, that didn't bother me as much as, running soaking wet. And, so I got through the first loop and then I found an official and turned in my timing chip because according to my data, there was no way I was going to finish the race in time. And So I was able to get some dry clothes on, eat a little something, and then go to the finish line. And I saw Steven cross the finish line. So I was there when he finished, and a couple of my friends that from Michigan who are also in the race. But what a mess. I mean, you know, my lessons learned from this race, you know, you think you're prepared and you just don't know. Like, I just didn't know how to ride a bike in the rain. Never done it, you know, and now I have. I need a better waterproof layer for my legs. I didn't plan that out. I had the wrong shoe covers. I had neoprene shoe covers, which were like sponges, and I needed a waterproof layer over my shoes and over my legs. You know, other than that, I mean, I managed my body temperature well after I got out of the water, and you know, it was a crazy day, and I'm thankful that I was able to experience it, because I'm sure you folks have heard that Ironman Alaska is no more. It was a one and done. They were supposed to have a contract for multiple years, and Ironman just decided to get out of it. And it's a shame, because it was such a beautiful place to be able to race. It was a beautiful place to visit after the race was over, to see the glaciers and you know, the people that were there, that they welcomed us, and it was really a terrific opportunity. But you know, I blew it on a number of levels in terms of managing riding in the rain. So yeah, that was my biggie. Lots of lessons learned there, and you know, and I won't have a chance to repeat it, but you know, I think I'd be mentally more prepared if I ever have to ride a bike for 7 or 8 hours in the rain again.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, what an experience. But it sounds like it was both, you know, it was good and bad at the same time.
Right.
And the thing about the weather is you just have no control. You don't know. You just don't know any of these races. It could, you know, it could happen. Steve G, you want to share yours?
Hello, am I there?
Yes.
My story is about a New York City marathon. It had nothing to do with the elements or things out of my control. It was simply a major fail on my part. And for all of us who are competitive, and we all have this at some level because we're out here doing it, there are certain races that just haunt you. Okay, and this particular marathon experience that I had goes back to 1985. So I've been haunted for a long time by this epic marathon fail. And that was one of the reasons that we had this kind of idea about, you know, the idea of sharing, you know, stories about, you know, singular events. And at the risk of sounding snobbish, you know, I was a young buck at the time. I was pretty fast, and I had, you know, a lot of high hopes for running a really fast New York City marathon. That being said, you know, I've aged and matured to the level where I fully support everyone at every level, at any speed. If you're out there doing it, really, I'm there for you. And I'm pleased that anybody's doing this, especially as we get a little bit older. And for the people who mentioned support for the back of the Packers, I think that's really a critical issue, and one that should constantly be reinforced to race organizers, because it's significant. Because, you know, if they want to be profitable, let's just a little sidebar. If they want to be profitable running these races, they've got to fill out, you know, the ranks, and they've got to include, you know, more people. Got to be more inclusive and reach out to, you know, to new groups of people who haven't tried this before. But they also have to support those people. And as you said, the elements could be a factor. For instance, in a big marathon race, if you're a newcomer or just not really fast, and you're going to run, you know, a 6-7 hour marathon, okay, you're still a marathoner, and you deserve the same support at whatever speed you're going at as, you know, the world-class, you know, athletes who are done in 2 hours. More so because, as you mentioned with these other races, you're exposed to the elements. for 6, 7 hours. Rain, cold, sleet, snow, hot. And regardless of the speed you're going, okay, the longer you're physically out there, the more you are susceptible. Okay, if you're a 2-hour marathon, at 2 hours you're done. Either way, you can suffer for 2 hours, but if you're out there for 3 or more times that, that's significant. And most of those people, let's face it, are probably not as well conditioned as the 2-hour world class marathoners. So, they're going to be, susceptible, to injury or to worse. So that's an important thing that I hope race organizers pay attention to. Anyway, off the soapbox for that. So the reason this race haunts me is because at the time I was young and I was in what they considered to be, marathon prime. I was 28 years old, and I was back into running, and I was pretty fit. And this was going to be my shot at being a sub 3-hour marathoner. And through the season that I was running in a lot of races and training pretty well. And I legitimately had the speed to run a 250 or so marathon. Okay. And I couldn't wait to do that. And leading up to the marathon, I was pretty much ready. This was going to be my day. And for people who are marathoners, just like, there's a certain milepost to say that you're a sub 3 marathoner. It's just one of those things that people aspire to. And I thought for sure I was going to be there. Fast forward, I didn't make it. And largely the reason I didn't make it had to do with planning. 1985 was the pre-chip era. Okay, there was still no chips, no timers, no anything like that. So the marathon had grown significantly, but we were still going on gun time at the time. And if you've done the New York City Marathon, you know it's a big obstacle just getting to the starting line, because there's a big choke point coming out of the organizing area. And basically I got stuck. I tried to get to where I thought I could self-seed myself, but by the time I got out into the Verrazano Bridge toll plaza, I was literally stuck. I couldn't move left, right, front, center, and I was way back from the starting line, and I was already starting to panic. So when the cannon went off, I couldn't even see it. I don't know. I just panicked at the start. So while I planned to run, 6.5 minute miles for the marathon on average, I found that by the time I reached the first mile of the marathon, I was at a little over 9 minutes, and we're still climbing up the Verrazano Bridge. So at that point, not even a mile into the race, I was in full panic already, because I thought, I wasn't going to be able to do this. And I raced down the other side of the Verrazano Bridge, and by the time I got into Brooklyn, I felt like I had to, catch up. Okay. And that just compounded all the mistakes. So running down the straightaway of 4th Avenue, I found myself looking at my watch and realizing I was running like 530 something miles, one after another. And I just thought I could do this for a little while until I can, get back on pace. And then I got to about 8 miles and I realized this is very smart. And I tried to, come off the throttle a little bit and kind of even out. But it was already starting to take its toll, and I was really starting to get worried. And by the time I got to the half mark, I don't remember my time exactly, but I knew that this was going to be a bad day for me. And when you're in races like that, we do that sometimes, even when we're in training, training days. You're just out there and you realize this is not going to work out today. But when you're in the middle of your goal race, okay, it really plays with your head. I climbed to the top of the 59th Street Bridge, and that's about 15 or so miles. And I shut down. I literally just shut down. And the one thing that I'll remember forever about that period was that as I shut down and started to walk, out of the blue appeared a massage station, literally at the top of the 59th Street Bridge, with a lonely lady and a little equipment there who just like appeared like an angel out of the sky and looked at me and said, "Would you like me to loosen you up a little bit? You look like you're struggling." And I just said, "Thank you so much. What else do I have to lose?" So for a couple of minutes there, I just stood there staring at the sky while this really nice lady kind of like tried to, kind of loosen up my calves and my thighs. And of course, at that point, I realized, the day was over for me. And I thanked her. I thanked her 100 times, and then I just started back down the hill. P.S. I still finished the race in a really respectable time. People that I tell a story to smack me and tell me, "Shut up. What are you complaining about?" Because I ran 3 hours, 21 minutes. But I was so dejected because I knew that I was in a sweet spot that I could really break the 3-hour mark for once in my life. And my wife met me after the race, and she was my tribe, my support group, and I had a few other people there. And I was so dejected, and they were so happy, they were so elated, because everyone who ever experiences the New York City Marathon as a spectator, knows that you get caught up in it. It's just such a great circus. And it really was for everyone. But I just remember my poor planning and really bad race strategy as being one that, as I said, will haunt me as the worst race experience of my life. Yes, I didn't run another marathon until 1999 because I just got fed up. I ran for a long time, but without any real purpose. I got busy with life, work, marriage, child rearing and all that stuff, and didn't get the urge to really go back. And it was there again at New York. This time I ran very well again. I was a little bit older, but I ran 3 hours and 5 minutes. And that day I ran it for fun, feeling like I had no shot at breaking 3 hours, although I was pretty fit. I had a really enjoyable race that day, and that's what I remember because it was actually fun. So again, it's of no real significance. It was just a race. Me, one of 20,000 or so people who were out there that day. We didn't have 50,000 people at the time, but 20,000 was enough. Fortunately, some years after that, they invented the chip system, which helped people because your time starts when you cross the starting line. But in those days, so to speak, it wasn't there. If you really wanted to have a good time, you had to get close to the starting line. And I was always sheep. I never wanted to be that guy that elbowed my way, to the start to get in front of people. I always tried to be considerate to everyone else. But it cost me that day. And that's just one that sticks with me. And that's my story.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That was some story. You brought up a good point about attitude and putting pressure on yourself. And just, before we close out this session, does anybody else have experience where you've put a lot of pressure on yourself and weren't able to meet those expectations, and then had another race where you had no expectations, but you exceeded?
Come on.
Yeah, Stephen Albright. Yeah, I'm going to stay to Steve. I understand how you felt because a couple of years ago I did Atlantic City 70.3, and it was probably one of the best days I ever had until I was at about 10K on the run. So I was really at that point thinking, I'm going to finish top 3 in my age group here, and I'm going to get a shot at the world championship. But it went south in the last 10K on that, and that still bothers me till today. So I can identify with you. And to Jackie, that was a very difficult day. I agree with everything you said, and it was just a really tough day in Alaska. But it was absolutely beautiful. But at one point on the bike course, when it had just stopped raining briefly, I said to some woman at one of the aid stations, looks like it's going to clear up. And she said to me, don't get your hopes up. It's going to be pouring in about 5 minutes. Okay, thanks.
Very dangerous. All right,
Well, listen,
well,
I have to tell you, you lost me when you said Ironman, Alaska. I was out at that point. So God bless you guys that even attempted it.
all right. Well, thank you all for participating and sharing your stories. And I'll be sending this out to the rest of the group. I'm sure they'll get a lot out of this. I got a lot out of this, and I appreciate all of your time. So thank you. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Hillary.
Bye.